Hello, well, I am here with my colleague, Dr. Anna Ruohonen. We have the privilege of presenting some research that's in progress. So we're interested in getting feedback and comments on our framework. Our research involves employment relationships and entrepreneurial ventures. And as you all know, employment relationships consist of a concrete part, which has to do with your offer letter, your the explicit terms of a contract, and an implicit part, which has to do more with expectations, promises, the unwritten piece of the employment relationship. And so that's part of the concrete piece and the implicit piece that refers back to the title of this session. So in our research, we wanted to understand what was the biggest difference in employment relations for new ventures versus established firms. And in our investigation, we came up, the big difference is the level of uncertainty and risk that new ventures face. And so in thinking about this, we discovered that the one area of the employment relationship that's particularly difficult to manage has to do with the implicit piece, the expectations and promises. So we've developed a framework to sort of break down some of the key areas of the employment relationship, particularly the content of it, the financial piece, the relational piece or the emotional value of it, and the shared vision. And so we've been developing some grounded theory on how entrepreneurs can manage those three pieces of it. Our initial thinking is that one of the key ways to manage this uncertainty is to reduce its impact. And therefore, there's a number of ways that we're discovering that entrepreneurs can do this. There's two classic ways in the literature to reduce the impact of uncertainty, is to sort of increase the legitimacy of the individual or the organization in the face of uncertainty. That reduces the sphere of it. And the second way to do that is to reduce the scale of the uncertainty. So we developed a framework to think about how, to examine how entrepreneurs manage this, the content piece, the financial piece, and the shared vision piece. And we've discovered in the entrepreneurial environment, this is our initial thinking, that there's some key ways that entrepreneurs can do this in terms of, first of all, with the increasing the legitimacy and reducing the scale of the uncertainty. In the situation of an entrepreneur, they can increase legitimacy by reinforcing their reputation as an expert. In other words, in this case, they want to sort of make sure their employees understand their level of expertise in the industry, their background in entrepreneurship, and any sort of previous entrepreneurial experience they have. In this case, this increases the assurance that employees have that the venture will be ongoing and that their employment expectations will be met. So that's one piece, to increase legitimacy. It's more difficult for entrepreneurs to do this than established firms, but I just outlined a couple of ways that they can do this. And the second piece of managing the uncertainty has to do with reducing the scale of it. So for instance, the entrepreneur can also reduce the scale or the impact of the uncertainty by expanding revenue streams. In many cases, a new venture, employees might be concerned because a new venture relies very heavily on one large client to support the operations, but an entrepreneur can expand revenue streams, and then also they can increase their personal commitment to the venture. In other words, maybe make sure that they increase their level of investment, and then also reduce scale by providing potential and current employees with other options, perhaps more short-term options, and more part-time work. Okay, so that basically shows the framework there about the impact of uncertainty on the employment relations. I'm now going to go and hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Anna Ruhonen, and she will take us further with additional avenues for research.
Wonderful, Lois. I'm happy to take over. Let's get things done. This is quite often the spirit within startup teams and otherwise entrepreneurship-oriented teams, and the sign of a mission-driven culture. So where do the risk and uncertainty come in this type of setting? There are 3 research directions that I would like to propose. The first research direction starts with the question: how do risk and uncertainty in new ventures affect expectations and promises that employers are making to their employees? It might help to understand where are the perceptions of uncertainty and risk located, so to say. In employees' mind, is the uncertainty associated with the management and their decision making? Is it associated with the team, with the external environment, or perhaps with the employee's personal position within the company? For instance, we might see that an employee feels very secure with the management and their decision making, fully trusts the team, and yet feels highly uncertain about one's own work. In the second research direction, figure it out for yourself attitude takes central stage. What do I mean by that? In the new venture culture, it is quite commonplace that you are assigned a larger task, and it is up to you to go ahead and find the way to make it happen. This might turn out to be a contributing factor to the feelings of risk and uncertainty and the perceptions of those. At the same time, this raises other interconnected questions, such as in the new venture settings, what are the principles and the rules, both spoken and unspoken, in getting promoted or in getting a raise or otherwise growing in terms of career and areas of responsibility? For the third research direction, startups are often perceived as 24/7 jobs. The proposed research angle would be to examine the correlation of risk and uncertainty with work-life balance, the presence or the lack of opposition between work and other life roles. And this research direction is one of the examples of how international and cultural setting might have an impact. So, in conclusion, these 3 and other interlinked research directions are likely to produce learning outcomes for entrepreneurship teaching, for executive education, understanding of HR and leadership practices in new venture companies, and for us to be able to contrast those with the established companies and that type of setting. So in the end, I would love to share with you just one slide, and that is the contact information for me and Lois, and just in summary of our research. I hope it is visible there. And thank you. I'm passing it on, I believe, to Mujtaba.
Well, thank you, Louis. Thank you, Anna, for starting the session despite the technical issues that I was experiencing on my end. It was a very informative presentation. I have a quick question. I'm just looking at the chats to see if you guys have any questions. And one of the questions that I received was regarding how do you teach about, what psychological contracts mean to students, and where would you place this in your entrepreneurship curriculum, and how would you go about teaching it?
Well, I'll take a stab at that.
Okay, thank you, Liz.
Part of it depends on the level of the student. The whole idea of, there's an entire literature on psychological contracts, which can be very complex. Depending on the level of the student, I would just focus on, break it down to a very simple part of promises and expectations, which is a little bit more intuitive. And then I would put it in the part of the entrepreneurship curriculum when you have launched your business and you're part of recruiting and onboarding your first employees, to make sure that that part is, so you're in the part where you're just beginning to be an employer organization. That's where I would place it there. So in a curriculum that has to do with, I mean, in the Desarian College at CSUN, we have one course that's devoted to customer discovery, sort of formulating your idea. And then the second follow-on course has to do with, now that you have your idea, how do you transform that into an operational business? And so I would place that in the human relations or human resource portion of that class.
Okay, thank you, Louis. So let's jump on to the next presenter. We have Jelani Odlem, who's a program manager for Mickelson Institute of Intellectual Property. She will present on how the Mickelson 20mm Foundation is engaging faculty in communities of practice to develop high quality instructional content and support IP education across campuses throughout the nation. So without any further ado, let's move on to Jelani.
Great, thank you, Jabba. I have some slides here, so I'm just gonna share my screen and you can let me know if you see it okay.
Yes, we can see.
You can see, okay, great. Hi everyone, thank you for the opportunity to present today. Thanks to CEC and ICSB. My name is Jelani Odlem, and I'm a program manager at the Michelson 20mm Foundation. We are a private education foundation in Los Angeles, and the Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property, or Michelson IP, is one of our flagship initiatives. So our mission is to address critical gaps in IP education and empower the next generation of inventors and entrepreneurs. Just a little bit of background, our founder is Dr. Gary K. Michelson. He's a philanthropist and a prolific inventor. He actually holds himself over 950 patents worldwide, and so is very invested in educating other innovators on the importance of IP. So today I'm going to share about the initiative. Quick disclaimer, I'm not an academic and I'm not a legal practitioner, so you could take this this presentation and my comments more from a programmatic perspective on what we've seen work in terms of IP education and some of the strategic partnerships that have been essential in helping us advance our mission. So a quick note on IP's role in the economy today. Decades ago, economists would tell us that the value of a corporation is 80% physical assets and 20% intellectual assets. But today we see that those numbers have actually flipped. So 80% of corporate value is in intellectual property, and in the US, according to the USPTO, 38% of total US GDP. Hello, can you still hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I was getting some feedback. And so the point here is that IP protected innovation is now one of the principal drivers of corporate value and national economic growth in the US. And so looking at IP in the entrepreneurial environment, how does it fit into today's topic of risk and uncertainty? I think we can look at IP as another way entrepreneurs can moderate risk using a legal framework. And so IP, we can look at it much like any other property right. It allows the owner to benefit from their work or investment. in a creation, and that includes the right to exclude. So in the entrepreneurial environment, IP can provide a unique value proposition, defensibility, and essentially an asset with commercial value attached to it that can then be strategized how to exploit that for competitive advantage in a complex environment. Lois talked earlier about increasing legitimacy. So entrepreneurs always have to navigate external actors. They need to learn how to use IP for their advantage, but also how to not infringe on others. So they're having to play both offense and defense here. And finally, while IP is rules-based and it is explicit, there are also a lot of gray areas. There are policy issues, and it's not always, there's not always a concrete answer. So we see a lot of value in an IP curriculum for business and entrepreneurship students, for them to become aware of these topics and have a certain amount of literacy to help them navigate the business environment. In the US, however, IP study is largely confined to law programs and graduate programs, leaving many undergraduate students sort of without exposure to the topic. And so, our work, we see it as helping to address this IP education gap. So we're creating and disseminating curriculum and resources that introduce the workings and the role of patents, copyright, trademarks, and trade secrets. And all of our resources are available at no cost and are openly licensed. So just to take you here through some of the curriculum and resources that we've developed, our first project was collaborating with some of the brightest minds in the field to develop this publisher quality open textbook called The Intangible Advantage. It is really a unique text written first and foremost for a general audience, not for legal practitioners. There's no legalese vocabulary, there's no IP jargon, and it was developed with a particular focus on supporting undergraduate students. So the authors were a Pulitzer Prize nominated IP expert, David Klein, and our executive editor was the former director of the Patent Office, David Kapos. The textbook is available in an interactive ebook format. That's our most popular format, and it's been adopted into many courses across disciplines at this point. Another curricular solution in the undergraduate space, we partnered with the University of Southern California to launch a permanent course in their Greif Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. It's a 3-unit elective that can fulfill credit under their entrepreneurship track. And it also doubles as a speaker series. So we've had speakers from Hulu, from Medtronic, Dollar Shave Club, to talk about how IP functions in these companies or in these startups. And we've seen growing demand every year from students really excited to take the course and learn about IP strategy, these companies. And for those interested on the line today, these lectures are all available for public viewing on our website or our YouTube channel. Another resource we developed both for faculty interested in accommodating the curriculum across different formats and for self-paced independent learners is our online course on Udemy. It covers all the fundamentals of IP in about 3.5 hours of content. And we've now seen the course taken by over 13,000 learners from across the world, not only based in the US, though it does cover US intellectual property law, and the learners are both from formal and informal educational contexts. In the 2-year space, we partnered with the National Association for Community College Entrepreneurship, NACE, to provide curriculum to community colleges nationwide. So through this effort, we have built off of that existing USC curriculum to develop a more modular format. And a big focus here has been ease of use and accessibility for faculty and for students, again, particularly those without a legal background. We also created an Educator Portal that houses the master course shell. The full curriculum could be a 3-unit course, but it's also built down to light and ultralight module options for those that can't commit as much time to IP but still want to expose students. And then I also wanted to share about a recent partnership that we've developed with VentureWell to conduct focus groups through their virtual open conference. And those were designed to really provoke thoughtful discussions on advancing IP education, on campus-based IP policy, how to facilitate student entrepreneurship and invention, and related topics. And so we'll be releasing a summary of these findings from the focus groups very soon. Stay tuned. And this is something we're hoping to build on. So perhaps maybe many of you on the line today might be interested in engaging with us, share your thoughts and insights on other things that we can develop and incorporate moving forward. So just quickly share some findings. This is from our original NACE pilot partnership of 1,600 students. 68% had never been exposed actually to the topic of IP previously, but in a post-course survey, 95% believed that it was a valuable topic for entrepreneurs, and 7 out of 10 were interested in learning more about IP. So that's it for me. Just a little bit about our curriculum and partnerships, and what we're working on to help entrepreneurs navigate the IP environment. And my contact information is also here for anyone interested in connecting after this session. I can also link you up with our faculty partners to share more specifics about the curriculum. And thank you, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Jelani. One of the participants wanted to know if you could share the link for the content on your website. If you could just point out in the chat where they could find out that information, that would be helpful.
Sure, absolutely. michelsonip.com, and I can link it out again.
Okay, in the chat, if you could basically help them navigate your website, that would be great.
Okay.
I have a question for you from one of the participants. It was in the Q&A forum. It was regarding the tools that you have, or what tools can educators use to teach about risk and uncertainty. Is there anything specific that your firm has developed or your institute has developed? And can you talk about some examples of how it's been applied in different universities?
Yes, definitely. So we developed the Educator Portal. You can find that as well on michelsonip.com as a way to make it a little bit easier for educators without a legal background to access these materials. So all of our materials are written, like I mentioned, without legal jargon. And so we believe that it's just an easier way for the educators to communicate to students kind of, you know, IP in a real world scenario. There's another section of our website. It's called Hot Topics in Intellectual Property, which I think is also another interesting resource, where these are mini articles, mini case studies about IP today. So I think our latest one was the Google versus Oracle copyright battle that's going on. And we try to keep these updated because, as I mentioned, IP law isn't always static. President is changing over time. The Supreme Court is weighing in on things. So yeah, our curriculum is definitely built so that it's kind of accessible in a way that we haven't seen a lot of legal curriculum built. So many of the faculty that's teaching do not have a JD or don't have a legal background themselves. And yeah, I'm always happy to link anyone up after the session to faculty that can explore further with you and kind of take you through the curriculum.
Thank you, Jelani. Now we'll move on to the next presenter, Art Neal, who's the Executive Director of New Media Rights and is a Professor of Law at California Western School of Law. His session will challenge what students need to know about formal legal frameworks of intellectual property, privacy, and business formation that govern their business and how it can be taught. So on to you, Neil. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, well, glad to be here this morning, and can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, fantastic, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I want to jump right off of the first two segments that talked about risk and uncertainty, and then Jelani kind of, you know, really laid out the importance of understanding IP and how important that can be and how central that can be to entrepreneurs' businesses these days. I want to kind of round things out by continuing with this kind of focus on the legal risk and uncertainty, and talk about some of the other areas of law that become particularly important for entrepreneurs, and how knowing about those, I think, can reduce the level of risk and uncertainty for those entrepreneurs. So quick introduction to my organization, New Media Rights. So as Java mentioned, I teach at California Western School of Law. I teach a sort of traditional doctrinal class that's internet law. And then I teach an internet and media law clinic where law students work firsthand with entrepreneurs. And we have a number of partnerships with local universities and incubators where we work with really early stage businesses to provide legal assistance. So we provide free and reduced fee legal services, which might be an important thing for people to know about. That's our main mission. In addition, we try to open things up and provide education. So most people we work with, the people we work with, by the way, are technology entrepreneurs and a really broad set of creators, everything from filmmakers to YouTubers to journalists and others. And so once we have provided these services, and we've provided services to over 2,500 people over our 13 years in existence, we then provide educational resources. So we have a YouTube channel, we have an app that's all about fair use under copyright law, we have written guides on our website, newmediarights.org, we have a book, and we go and we give workshops and things like that about these issues. We also try to change and improve the law for the folks who are dealing with this on the ground. You know, larger companies, big business has a presence with policymakers, but we try to have bring the issues and how the law is affecting entrepreneurs on the ground to policymakers through our public policy work, particularly at the Copyright Office and the FCC. We're an independently funded program of California Western School of Law, so we get a variety of grants and other support to do the work that we do. What I want to talk about today was what I think it's really important to be teaching entrepreneurship students through those thousands of cases that we've worked on at New Media Rights. Most of those clients, in fact, pretty much all those clients, don't have general counsel, don't have attorneys in-house. And so it's the entrepreneur themselves that is trying to navigate these challenges. So we've really seen the pitfalls that happen firsthand. And so I want to talk about the areas where just knowing what you don't know can make a huge difference. Then provide some other resources in addition to those fantastic IP resources that Jelani mentioned from Michelson Foundation. And then I want to encourage you all to consider reaching out to some experts in your communities, in the local law school entrepreneurship clinics that have really blossomed over the last 10 years, from just a few to being to a couple hundred. Okay, so what should we teach entrepreneurship students about the law? I think from a big picture perspective, first of all, and I think somebody talked about this in the first session this morning, there's this idea of just kind of knowing what you don't know, right? And so an additional way of reducing uncertainty, right, is to be prepared for these legal pitfalls. You know, there's this mentality that Anna mentioned of getting things done, which is a great mentality and just kind of moving forward. But these legal pitfalls, knowing about them in advance, right? Knowing that you need to actually have your trademark clear before you go and use that name that you want to use for 2-3 years and build up all this goodwill, and then find out that, oh, when you went to register it, somebody else was using it. Knowing a little bit about trademark, right, can make a huge difference in that case. So the idea here is I don't think students need to know how to register a patent or trademark. They don't need to know how to draft a terms of use and privacy policy or understand complex privacy or employment laws, but they do need to know and understand when to seek help. And for the things that they can do DIY, let's say like a copyright application, you know, how can they make better choices that put their business on better the long term. So as Jelani mentioned, IP is critical. It's a critical asset for these businesses. But so is privacy law, right? And so with IP, you obviously need to know about these areas: copyright, trademark, patent, trade secret, because it's a huge part of the value of your business. Even if you're not sort of a high tech business these days, it still becomes a very important asset. Well, as far as privacy law, entrepreneurs, besides creating value in IP, they're collecting personal information, and they need to know how to properly collect it, use it, share it. There are new laws in California like the CCPA, new laws in Europe like the GDPR that really have tightened up privacy law. And those laws have real teeth, and they can end a business if entrepreneurs don't actually comply with them in the ways that they need to. And so even more importantly, privacy law has some overlap with IP in this space, because if the entrepreneur doesn't get the rights to the IP that they need, right, from say an independent contractor they hire to make an app or do a video, or if the entrepreneur doesn't get the rights to the personal information that they're collecting from individuals who visit their website, well, most entrepreneurs these days seem to, some people want to keep it as a private business, some people want to go public, but a lot of people want to be acquired. And when you're acquired by a larger business, you need to have the rights to the IP that your business owns. You need to have the rights to the personal information, private information that you collected from individuals, so you're actually able to be acquired. Because those companies are going to look and they're going to say, do you have the rights that you need? And so privacy law is important. In addition, employment law is important as well, right? These days, there's a new law in California, AB 5. Who's an independent contractor? Who's an employee? Why does it matter? It matters for a number of reasons. Obviously, labor law disputes, getting a labor board complaint, things like that can jeopardize a company. But again, there's an IP overlap here, right? So employment law, if you have an employee, most of what the employee creates, typically the company owns. But it's important for an entrepreneur to know that. And it's important for them to know also that if you hire an independent contractor, right, you also, the default situation for most types of, let's say, intellectual property is that the contractor owns it unless there's actually a written transfer. And so by knowing that, the entrepreneur can reduce the risk. When they hire an app developer, or they hire a video creator or someone to do the logo for their business, they'll know they need to get an assignment. They need to get the rights transferred to them. And it doesn't mean they have to write the contract or know how to write an assignment, but knowing that how those rights exist and when they need to be transferred is really important. And so a little bit about employment law, contract drafting and negotiation, explaining to, I think, helping entrepreneurs understand, why would we write up a formal contract? When do we need formal contracts? Again, this fits with IP because a lot of times you need a formal transfer in writing to actually transfer intellectual property. So if you're the business person, right, if you're the business side of things early on, this happens so much with our entrepreneurs, and you work with engineers, or you work with software developers, or you work with artists. If you're the business person, you're not necessarily the person who's creating the asset, the intellectual property. And so unless you have contracts in place, you might actually own very little of your business. This happens with a lot of like weekend kind of coding events where business folks connect with engineers, and then they code up an app and things like that. And then the business folks wonder next week afterwards, hey, well, what do I own? Like, can I actually use this? And there become questions about IP ownership. In addition to those areas, entrepreneurs need to know a little bit about business formation. Obviously, why would I even go with a corporation or LLC? Why would I even think about formally forming the business? When should I do that? And of course, you talk a lot about why this is so important for protecting the individual's personal assets. These days, a lot of young entrepreneurs want to know about B Corp certification and public benefit corporation options, different ways of working in a public interest aspect to their business. And there are other issues, knowing about insurance and enforcement and defending against legal claims are all important as well. So that's what to teach. And I think that I can do, offer some, some more clarity on. But as far as resources, I've got a couple resources that come directly from us. I think the Michelson resources are good for IP. We have a book that's used around the country called Don't Panic. We have sample syllabi hypos that we've done. This book gets used in a variety of courses from, it gets used from courses like journalism and media studies courses to music, business of music programs at Berklee College of Music. It gets used in art and business classes at UCSD and other classes as well in the engineering technology departments around the country at various universities. And the book is, again, kind of like Jelani was describing, an effort to write in plain English, an effort to write to folks who are not attorneys, to at least offer that first step of knowing what you don't know. A lot of our resources beyond the book are available for free on our website, the Fair Use app, our video channel, our additional written guides are all for free. Most of them are openly licensed as well, so you can check those out. And again, newmediarights.org. If you go newmediarights.org/book, you can request free access to check out that book. And so we've done a number of hypotheticals for professors who wanted to adapt the book into their classroom. So we're open to doing that as well. I think that one other thing I wanted to say is, we were talking about these, I think going back to what Lois and Anna was talking about implicit constructs outside the legal contract language. I did want to mention that one of the ways that I see this pop up is in this idea of enforcing contracts, I think would be maybe just one example, right? So if you hire somebody to build an app or build software and you pay them $5,000 and they don't deliver, well, there's this option that's in your contract and it says, well, you can, I can sue you under California law and we can go to the courts of San Diego County and that's what's going to happen. But the truth is that it's not going to happen because that amount of money, there's not going to be an attorney that probably takes that case. It's never going to really go to court. And so the student, the individual entrepreneur needs to know that despite that being there, that's what the language says. It's not really likely to happen in this situation. What's likely to happen is you need to know other forms of enforcement. How could you put moral pressure on the individual to come through and deliver the way they said they were going to do? Could you put public pressure on them? And so teaching students, I think, about the other kinds of, the things that are implicit outside of the explicit legal contract language is really important. One thing I wanted to mention before I ended my segment was law school clinic collaborations. One thing that we do a lot of is go out to local universities and universities in Southern California and give talks about basically basics of the law for entrepreneurs with different subjects, whether that's IP or contract drafting or privacy law or media law. And you might have a clinic in your neighborhood. There are now, I think, upwards of 100 clinics or so. I've put a list here, and just some ideas for collaborations are contact those folks and have them come in and do a module, a course module on a particular area of law. Have them come in and do workshops. Have them come in and advise, if you're an incubator, have them advise your students and startups. And I think fundamentally, it's also a great way, we bring our law students in, right? And then supervise, and then we're able to connect the lawyers and business people in that region.
Yeah, thank you, Art. We are running short of time. Apologize again for the technical issues that delayed this session. We have about 4 minutes before this session ends. Art, if you could share all the links on the chat, that would be greatly appreciated.
Oh, yes.
Just because we have 4 minutes, I have 2 questions. One for Luis and Anna, and the other one for Giovanni and Art. The first question for Anna and Luis is, given the current crisis, what can entrepreneurs or small business owners do to minimize the risk or to manage this uncertainty better? And how can they plan out, what steps can they take to ensure that they are better prepared when such an event occurs in the future?
Well, if I'll go first, I suppose from the perspective of our research and the work they're doing, it offers the possibility to look at all of the issues connected to employment relations from 2 angles, from the organizational perspective and also from the employee's perspective. So from the organization perspective, that is a way to look at the employment side, at the HR practices, to perfect those, to take them to the next level of leadership as well, in terms of organizing the relations with the employees. Be mindful about the promises that are being made. And from the employees side, this is the type of work that we're doing. It also gives a possibility to reflect and to learn how to better formulate your expectations, taking into account the pressures both of the company internal and, in this case, related to your question, external environments, to be able to better formulate those and to path the way towards the work contributions that are meaningful and that lead to possible advancement, promotion, and of course also work-life balance, which is currently a big challenge for all of us in the reshaping environment.
Thank you, Anna. Again, due to shortage of time, I'll just quickly one quick response either from Jilani or Art regarding how students can be better prepared to minimize the legal cost. So the lawyers cost a lot. What can students do upfront that would allow them to reduce the cost of legal?
I have one big tip here, and that's to re-emphasize the existence of the entrepreneur and IP clinics at the law schools in the United States. Most of those clinics provide pro bono assistance, okay? And the USPTO, on that list that I just shared online from our website, the USPTO has a bunch of certified clinics in both trademark and patent who literally register those for free. And so I just cannot recommend the clinics enough to folks. And even in Europe, for those in Europe, there is a network called iLink. And there's not as many clinics in Europe, but there are some. And so I think that is one of the best ways. The other way is that at a lot of law schools now, they have legal incubators for early stage lawyers. Those legal incubators, they cost less, but they're overseen, again, by mentors who have been doing this for a while. But the lawyers are young lawyers who are trying to just get their practice started. And so they're early career lawyers, and they might be a little bit more affordable, but they're overseen by mentors and stuff. So I think those are great options to keep those costs down early.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that Luis, Anna, Jilani, and Art took to impart this education and the knowledge, share the knowledge with us. Let's continue this conversation on the HUA app. There are a bunch of questions that I think you guys can respond to. So if you go to your session on the HUA app and respond to that, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. If you have